The NautZone live, the post-game edition of the AFC final divisional game. The Buffalo Bills lose to the Kansas City Chiefs at home, 27-24. It was a barn burner to the end there. Scott Gulbransen back with you, along with my co-host Ryan Dyrud from LA Football Network. And Ryan, boy, this game I think lived up to everything it was built up to be. The Bills looked like they were in control. They were running the ball down the throat of the Chiefs for a long time. Then they seemed to abandon it there in the second half. And Patrick Mahomes does what Patrick Mahomes does, now moves his overall record to 39-11 on the road as a starting quarterback, his first playoff win on the road, and they're going to face Baltimore. Give me your initial thoughts on how this one ended.
Yeah, I mean, wide right? Every
Poor Bills fans.
Probably worst two words in the city of Buffalo. I'm sure that's like if you can mute words like you do on Twitter or X, I'm sure the city of Buffalo has the two words wide and right muted, and especially after this game. But yeah, Scott, I mean, great game, a lot of fun. I liked Buffalo in this one. You get the home field advantage. They were one of the hottest teams in all of football. The Chiefs offense has looked not just not good, not Chiefs-like. It's looked pretty poor all season long, and their offense looked pretty good again today. They got it going with Mahomes and Kelsey. The running game with Pacheco was on point. The offensive line did great against that pass rush. I mean, Mahomes saw little to no pressure all game long. I haven't looked at like the pass rushing stats by any means yet. It just ended. As everyone knows, we're live. It ended just momentarily ago. But yeah, I mean, hats off to Mahomes and the Chiefs. They came out and played when it mattered most. And I thought Buffalo played well. Josh Allen played great. So, and we'll get to this in a second, but I want to get your reaction first, but I have a good question for you to follow up. But great game. If I'm just being honest, if we're talking fans here, Scott, I did not want to see KC win again. But hey, hats off to Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs.
That's the thing, though. It's like, they've now become they've taken the mantle from Brady and Belichick, right? People, because they've been so dominant, they're in their sixth straight AFC championship game. I mean, it's crazy to think about that. And so I understand people feeling that way. And I think the country overall was kind of siding with Buffalo because Buffalo has had so much pain and anguish and all of that stuff. And then Josh Allen just had an incredible game. But if you didn't see the game, I'm going to play you. So here we are in the fourth quarter, just under 2 minutes left. And the Bills are in field goal range. Now, they couldn't get the ball closer to the end zone. They were moving the ball pretty well, and they just could not do it. And this is what my good friend Fabian, a good friend of mine online, who talks about the -4, which is, when you don't get 7 points, you go for the field goal. Can somebody come back to haunt you? In this case, the field goal itself haunts you. Here, if you didn't see it, is Buffalo lining up to tie the game, maybe hold Kansas City and go into overtime.
Has tremendous support in the building. If he has to make one for us, the game on the line, he will. 44 yards, Bass. No, he doesn't make it. Wide right. Wow. The two most dreaded words in Buffalo.
Indeed, the most dreaded words in Buffalo. And boy, I'll tell you what, that did not go as expected. And they talked about the weather. Now, they were going with the wind, so they had the wind at their back. They weren't worried about that early in the game. They had talked about how there might be a 10-yard difference, Ryan, with this. But, man, you look at what happened and transpired over this game, and you knew it was going to be close down to the end. And that's the thing with the Bills. They have not been able to finish. You saw Mahomes be able to do that. They get the ball back. They get consecutive first downs, and basically the game is over. But you got to credit the Bills. I mean, Ryan, they were the hottest team in the NFL for the last 6 weeks of the season going into the playoffs. This game, you kind of figured they would take it because it's at home in Buffalo and it's such a tough place to play, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, no, and Jim Nance Jim Nance is one of the best in the business. I love Jim Nance, but with the ultimate kicker jinx right there, literally as it snapped, quoting the head coach, if there's a kick that needs to be made, we know Bass is going to make it. And sure enough, you get the nice slice for those golfers out there. Is it just slices to the right? I won't even say the W word, but yeah, I mean, great game, Scott. It was a lot of fun, and I thought both. It's unfortunate when you lose kind of in that fashion with the missed kick in order to tie. but I felt for the most part, now there was a few probably missed officiating calls, which I'm sure we can get into, and we're going to get into the other games as well. But for the most part, I thought this was just a clean game that was well fought, and it wasn't like an ending where you're like, oh man, this team like totally pissed it away or got screwed over.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, there was some, I thought I saw some officiating. I got to tell you this funny story. So I was criticizing some of the officiating. And this guy tweets back at me, and I guess he's a college referee, and he was really upset. Like I offended him for it. So it was really funny. But there was some of that going on. And, but you look at a game like this and both teams just come in there. But that's the thing, you have to, no matter whether you like them or hate them, the Kansas City Chiefs, they were struggling, like you talked about, offensively all season long. That was the talk of the league. And then when it comes to crunch time, though, it just seems like they're able to put it together. It's pretty remarkable. And to me, watching it tonight, even if you're rooting against it, you sit there and you look at it and you're like, wow, this is incredible, because they're just able to do it when it matters most. And that's what happens. You could be the best team in the regular season, doesn't matter. And the Baltimore Ravens have not only done it in the regular season, now they've done it through one playoff game. And these two teams connecting with each other is going to be really interesting, because now, as the pressure goes up a notch for the AFC Championship game, an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, it's going to get crazy in there. And it's hard. How can you, yes, the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites, but man, it's hard to bet against Mahomes.
Yeah. And, this will be the first, AFC Championship game in the last 6 years, not in Arrowhead, which is insane. But they're still in it. They're still in it. They're just not at home this one time.
They're just not at home.
They're actually in it. But yeah, it's hard to bet against them as much as everyone wants to, and as much as everyone desires to. It's, you really, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like they put out every single time, and they come to play, and they got a ways to go to get to that Belichick Brady aura, but they're certainly the closest, and it's very few removed since Brady and Belichick. It's we're 5 years since Brady left New England, and now obviously Belichick leaving New England just last week officially. But in those 5 years, they're certainly the closest team that can even be in that same breath, because of just the dominance and the consistency that they've shown. And Scott, I think I said this on our last show, if I'm not mistaken, or I said it on another show maybe, but they have and this is just going to be a weird comparison probably, but just to kind of for fun, and we're live and it's late, and then you're late on your time. I'm much later than I am. But this year's Chiefs in a way reminds me of the 2015 Broncos, and Brett Veach, what he's done as a GM, and John Elway, what he did as a GM for the Broncos. And I know in totality, a lot of people send a lot of hate to John Elway as a GM, which I think is unwarranted. I think he's actually did a good job. He had a bummer end of the tenure there. But if you think about it, in 2013 and 2012, even, the Broncos had one of the most historic offenses of all time, led by Peyton Manning. 2013 was officially the greatest offensive year ever we've seen statistically. They go to the Super Bowl, they lose, get dominated by the Seattle Seahawks. Then they flip and become a defensive juggernaut. And in 2015, Peyton Manning was a shadow of himself, injured for half the year. You had Brock Osweiler play, and the defense was dominant. They win Super Bowl 50 against Carolina that year. And this, I'm not saying Mahomes is a shell of himself, but this Chiefs team has flipped from what they've been in years past as being an offensive juggernaut to now being a competent offense, but a defense that going into this game hadn't given up more than 7 points in the second half.
Yeah.
Defense given up 400 total yards, hadn't given up 300 yards passing. And so what Brett Veach has done in building, and Steve Spagnuolo has done with this defense, is why they truly are a team, I think, that, maybe we didn't give a lot of credit to, and they need to be reckoned with.
Well, and it goes back to balance, and it goes back to complementary football, right? So when the Chiefs were in, and the comparison with the Broncos is a good one, going back to 15, 16, because if you look at that situation, you look at the Chiefs, yes, that had the offense, and that's what was winning them games. And their defense was passable enough, middle of the road defense type. And then, you see them lose some offensive firepower. You see Tyreek Hill go, okay, and they have trouble with wide receivers here. Now, Rashee Rice came on at the end of the year and did a great job for them. But you see that, but they balanced it out because the defense got better. And I think that's a good lesson, because you get into arguments all the time. People are like, well, defense still wins championships. Like, no, it's offense in the new NFL. And the reality is it's a balance between the two. Sometimes you're going to be one year, you're going to be a little heavier on the offense and your defense is a little weaker, and then vice versa. But you can win with both. They just have to be somewhat in balance, or at least balance each other out. And I think you're right about that. And then you go and you look at, for example, the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, after a close first half against the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud, of course, wasn't able to get going like he was the rest of the season. No wonder. Baltimore, a tough place to play. Not only that, Ryan, that Baltimore defense, really, really tough. And then you look at Lamar Jackson, who's going to win the MVP award. And people criticizing because he only had 152 yards of passing. But then you look at what he did rushing. You look at what he did during the game. And it's pretty remarkable. That Ravens team seems to me as well. And as I said, I can't bet against Kansas City, so to speak. But man, if the Ravens had a year where it looks like it's their year, at least to get to the Super Bowl at this point, this looks like it based on what I saw against the Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a good transition there to get into the first playoff game of the weekend. I mean, Baltimore's the real deal. We talked about it, a few weeks ago, especially after they blew out San Francisco on Christmas Day. And it was like, okay, this is a team that all year, kind of similar to others, that hadn't been getting the credit probably deserved. But they've just been a consistent team. They're well coached by John Harbaugh. They have two of the best coordinators in football, Todd Monken and Mike McDonald, who potentially are both going to be head coaches next year. What's funny, Scott, I love just comparisons. It's my favorite thing. Comparing college quarterbacks to pro quarterbacks. Everyone hates it. I love comparisons. But this feels like the 2022 Eagles, right? This is what this Baltimore Ravens team feels like. Now, John Harbaugh is much more tenured and seasoned than Nick Sirianni was last year. That's the difference there. He's been there, 14 years or whatever. He's been in Baltimore, and so he can withstand, his coordinators leaving. But they have those two pillars as their coordinators. They have a great quarterback as their leader. They finally have some offensive, firepower that can assist with Lamar Jackson. And as always, they have a great defense, but it just continues to get better. And what's wild is, they had Wink Martindale and moved on from him. It was just like I think we can do better without you. They go and get Mike McDonald and look at what they've done. So hats off to Houston. And we can maybe dive in this game more if you want, but hats off to Houston. Great season. I mean, way ahead of schedule than what anyone expected, having the second and third overall pick. I know they traded up for that third, and then all of a sudden winning a playoff game and making the divisional round. So they have a bright future. But Baltimore was just the much better team top to bottom at this point.
They were. And as I told you, 152 yards for Jackson in the air, 100 on the ground. Okay, so he ran for 100 yards again. And of course, they want him to pass. Well, we talked about this on another show a couple of weeks ago, where the fact that he was passing more and he was not relying on running. But against the Texans, he did. He had to, and he did it well. And I think I'm just struck. I guess I've always been a Lamar Jackson fan. So I look at Lamar Jackson and I understand, as we talked about, I think last week, the fact that, the Ravens have to win. He's sort of got to get over that hump to show, just like a Mahomes has done, right? Where you get over the hump, you're able to win the big game. And I think that game is going to be against Kansas City. Now, of course, then you get to the Super Bowl and it's like, well, okay, did you win the Super Bowl? But I think Lamar Jackson, if you look at it this year, I just see him differently. Yes, he's doing some of the same things he did, even going back to his MVP year. But I think he's a more well-rounded player. I think he throws the ball much more accurately, and he uses his feet when he has to, but it's not his first option. And I think a lot of people think of it as his first option, and it's not. He just does it. We saw it with Josh Allen tonight with the Bills too. When you got to take off, you take off. And if you have the ability to do it, you do it. But are you with me on that? You think that if Lamar Jackson, if he beats Patrick Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl, that maybe some of that'll go to rest?
It should.
Yeah.
Will it? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of the chicken and the egg argument or whatever. I mean, it's hard. It's right. Unless he does it multiple times, there's always going to be some excuse or something. And I think and this kind of even goes back, I was going to ask you and then we moved on, but it kind of goes back to even, Josh Allen. And it's like, how much does, when you look at quarterbacks in this league and when you look at quarterbacks that you quote unquote, I'm not saying you, but in general, trust in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look over the last decade, there's one, right? It's Mahomes. You could maybe argue Joe Burrow, who but he's been hurt 2 of his 4 years. And his
Right.
other 2 years, he made deep playoff runs. Outside of that, out of all 32 quarterbacks, there really isn't one. So it's hard to knock a guy if they can't quite get over that hump. Now, I would hope if he does it, they that puts some of it to rest, because I think it's deservedly so. I mean, he's just that good, and I don't think he's like, it'd be one thing if he was going out in the playoffs and like throwing 4 interceptions and just absolutely laying an egg, but it's another to play well and lose. So we'll see what happens. But I hope Scott, I mean, I just think he's one of the great players in our game. I think he's so fun to watch and deserves to get more praise than he probably does nationally.
Yeah, but I think he can earn more, at least like you said, there's always going to be people, if they don't like a player, they're going to be critical no matter what. But by the way, Jose El Marinas has a comment, and I put it up a minute ago, and he says, did you guys see that Taylor Swift was Kelsey's girlfriend? He's being facetious, of course.
What?
But, yeah, I know. It's crazy. I did not. But Jose, I got a special for you here, buddy. Here we go.
Tim. Oh, there's his brother. Says right on. That's Jason.
There you go. Oh, sorry. I didn't want to play it twice.
Yeah, I wanted to see it again. Gorgeous.
Yeah. That's for Jose, though, because he's being a smart ass. I knew somebody would be a smart ass, but because we don't really talk about it here, but it was going to be fun anyway. But yeah, that Ravens game, of course, like you said, CJ Stroud, good season for them. And they really, if you look at their cap space and what they're going to be able to do, I think the Texans are going to be a force in the AFC and in the AFC South. And you talked about those AFC quarterbacks. Now he joins that group. We'll see what he does in his sophomore year. I expect him to come out more seasoned. And that game was tough, I think, for a young team like the Texans, who are on their way up to have gone into Baltimore and win. So we'll do that on the other side. But now on the NFC side, Ryan, today, of course, we'll start with today's game, and we'll go back to yesterday's game in just a second. But if you look at what happened yesterday, the fact is, boy, you look at today. Got to go back. Detroit Lions.
I know.
Sorry, I'm losing track of it already. I know. And I got my stats on the iPad here. But anyway, we go to Detroit, and of course, that's the story everybody talked about. I picked the Buccaneers in this game. Almost came to fruition. But man, that Detroit team just is so great. He like their coach, right? Dan Campbell sets the tone for that team. And just when you think they're going to get knocked out, they make a play. And of course, Baker Mayfield throws a pass that he regretted, and he talked about it in the post game. But this Detroit team now has to go to San Francisco. We'll talk about San Francisco in a second. But what did you think of the Lions today? I thought the matchup, that's why I picked the Buccaneers, not because I don't think the Lions could go further in the playoffs. I just thought it was a tough matchup for them, and it turned out to be that way for most of the game.
Yeah, another great game. I mean, it was nice that this weekend, outside of the Baltimore Texans game in the second half, it was close in the beginning, but all other 3 games were nail biters to the very end, which is what you want to see at this junction in time in playoff football. And I mean, another great game. 2 first overall picks with Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff. 2 kind of, in a way, castaways. Baker much more. Obviously, this is his 4th team. Jared just got traded once, but was kind of cast away from the Rams, and now obviously the city of Detroit loves him. And I mean, he played so good. I mean, hats off to him, how well he played, and it was a great called game by Ben Johnson. I was surprised, Scott, and maybe you've looked. It's been a busy day for all of us here at Sportsnaut and everywhere, but I haven't looked at like the blitz percentages. But I felt like the Buccaneers blitzed a lot less than I expected, and I felt like that was what was going to win in the game, because Jared Goff does not perform well under blitzes and under pressure. And that's how you beat a Jared Goff-led offense. And it felt like when they did blitz, they had success, but they just didn't do it enough. They played too much zone. They sat back too much. They kept talking about in the broadcast how the linebackers are just getting dominated over the middle. And it's like, well, you should probably change it up a little bit, or just blitz your linebackers. Because when they blitzed Levante David, he had that nice sack when he got even held by the running back there. So that was, to me, the story. Is I felt like Todd Bowles and the defense, as great of a season and as great as a coach Todd Bowles is, I thought he left a little to be desired in this game, defensive play calling, and just kind of let Jared Goff and Ben Johnson and the Lions kind of dictate what they wanted to do on offense. And when you allow that, it's one of the best offenses in football. And so they had to get after him. I just felt like they didn't do it enough.
Yeah, exactly. And it was crazy because there was a stretch there early in the game where Todd Bowles was blitzing. They were really coming after Goff. And I talked about this with our NFL managing editor, David Kuhl, earlier this week, as we were previewing the games for video here at Sportsnaut. I was talking to him about Goff's situation. He was, he's near 70 some percent completion percentage, over 11 yards, I think it is. And then under pressure, though, it was 56%. I think it went up to 61 after today, but it was 56%. And so you look at that and you think, well, that's what you have to do. And the Buccaneers defense has done so well down the stretch here, playing that aggressive defense. And I don't know, that's the difference though, right, Ryan? You get into playoffs and things just get tighter. And I think that goes for coaches, not criticizing him per se, but when you haven't necessarily been there before and you get there and you're in that environment in Detroit, which was electric, obviously, with all the years of futility they've had there. And then all of a sudden you might draw back a little bit, right? You might fear being that aggressive. I saw that with them. And then I think for them too, offensively, Baker did what he did. He had the one mistake at the end, but he did really well otherwise. But they also abandoned the run early too. And I don't understand that, because Rachaad White had like 50 yards going into the third quarter, and then they just kind of abandoned the run. I'm not sure why they did that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and we're going to get to that on the next game too. I think that's just an epidemic in today's NFL and today's play calling for whatever reason. Because especially when it's working, it makes no sense why you wouldn't continue with that. I mean, Rachaad White only had 9 carries.
Yeah.
The whole game. 9. And he was very efficient. 9 for 55, 6.1 yard per average.
Yeah.
And to just not use that. And it wasn't like Baker was playing bad. And so obviously the passing game was working to an extent, but sometimes, there was a quote by, I know he's now fired and scorned here in LA, but there's a quote by Brandon Staley, former Los Angeles Chargers coach, that I loved when he was talking about running the football. And, he's a defensive minded guy. And he said, you run the football to dictate the physicality of the game, because when you run, you force, and this is going to sound like common sense, but a lot of people don't think about it. When you run, you're forced to tackle on every single play. Exactly. A passing play can be incomplete. It can go out of bounds. It can, whatever it may be, no matter what, when you run. I mean, obviously there's the 1% where they run a sweep to the outside and run out of bounds, but almost 99.9% of the time, it's physical between the trenches, you're tackling. And so you're dictating the physicality of the game. And sometimes you can wear a defense down by pounding the rock like that. And when you run your lead back 9 times, I mean, it's tough to really dictate any physicality.
No. Exactly. And that's, I don't understand. I just don't understand it, but I think you're right. I think that because of the way offenses are now, and because of the I think devaluing of the running back, and I'm not saying that it's like old school running back and football where you're going to give a guy 30 carries a game. But when you look at Rachaad White, a good running back, he really is a good running back, and he got the touchdown early. He really had a head of steam going. Keep giving them the rock, right? Get it going. And to your point about the physicality, especially against a team like the Lions, who are tough anyway. And like I said, that's their mentality. You got to bring them that right to their doorstep. You got to bring the same mentality to their doorstep, especially at a home game, right? On the road for Tampa Bay in the playoffs. You got to do that. And so I don't understand what he did there, but they kept it close anyway. That defense did well, and like you said, Baker Mayfield. And then Jared Goff. You got to look at Jared Goff, man. This was a guy written off when he got traded from the Rams. He goes to Detroit. They absolutely love him there. He's had a good season. Is he a perfect quarterback? No. Is Matthew Stafford, to me, more elite? Absolutely. But still, Jared Goff has done an amazing job, not only on the field, but also leading this team despite some of the things you're talking about with the pressures and all that stuff, and the fact that he drops off considerably, but he just gets it done.
Yeah. I mean, he's so good within the system, right?
Correct.
And there's a lot of those quarterbacks that, have made a career of it. And I love seeing his success, because when he was traded, and I don't think Brad Holmes would have said this, I don't think Dan Campbell would have said this, but basically probably everybody but those 2 guys and maybe Jared Goff said this was a trade to get draft picks, and then Jared Goff was a bridge quarterback till they could draft their quarterback of the future.
Yeah.
And as it seems, obviously going to the NFC Championship, he is the quarterback of the future, still under 30 years old, still on the Rams contract that they signed him to. So, he's done a hell of a job. It'll be interesting to see, and this is getting way ahead and I don't want to take anything away from him, but if Ben Johnson does get, a head coaching gig, it'll be interesting to see how they can nurture a new OC relationship to keep him going. But, phenomenal passer, beautiful touch. I mean, his accuracy is great. It's just got to be within the system. He's not a guy that's going to go out of the system and go off script and be able to do things. But hey, there's a lot of quarterbacks like that. And obviously he's in the NFC Championship game. So, you got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, with the ability to get and they struck gold with Laporta as well, right? For that tight end, he's able to get the ball off quickly. Amazing draft. And then then you add in the running backs. And you have a veteran in Montgomery, and it's just crazy how they've been able to put that together. And it's not a surprise. There's people who didn't think that they were going to be a playoff team this year. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. If you look at all the injuries they had last year, you knew they had a good roster. And then the draft, I mean, it's panned out well for them. So you got to like what's going on there. And they are going to go to
Real quick,
San Francisco. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, before we get to that game,
please go ahead.
One more kudos to Dan Campbell, because I know a lot of people see him as a head coach as just kind of like a hype guy, as like your a movie character, if you will, which I think a lot of it is. But I just want to point out, like, one among many, but one like truly savvy head coaching move that he has made among many is, when he was first hired and he built his staff, he hired Anthony Lynn as his offensive coordinator. And nothing against Anthony Lynn. I think he's still a good football coach. But when they started off very slow on offense. And he, halfway through the season, basically took over play calling duties from Anthony Lynn. He told him himself. And then after the season, then promoted Ben Johnson to be his offensive coordinator. Now we've seen that trajectory skyrocket. Yeah. So one of those savvy coaching moves that probably doesn't get talked about, but that's being a head coach and being a CEO of your football team. And that's why they're in the NFC Championship. Yeah.
I got to make tough choices. And sometimes it's on the fly like he did. And now look what Ben Johnson's going to be a head coach this next season. I firmly believe, unless he turns down everything, you never know. That could happen, but he did
last year.
Yeah, he did last year. He's been interviewing all over the place. You name it, LA, Atlanta, Washington, everywhere he's been. So we'll see where he ends up. But now they have to go all the way to the Bay Area. They're going to have to go play San Francisco. This game was the shocker, right? This game was the shocker of the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at what Green Bay was able to do, Jordan Love's played well down the stretch anyway. He goes down to Dallas, has almost a perfect game. And then he goes to San Francisco and almost has a perfect game, except for the interception at the end of the game, of course, where he throws across his body, trying to do a little too much. Not surprising for a young quarterback in his first real big game, I think, when you think about them going to San Francisco. But I'll tell you what, we'll get to the 49ers in a second. But, man, the Green Bay Packers, you talk about a team I didn't give any chance to. I'll be honest. I was like, yeah, whatever, the Green Bay Packers. I like Jordan Love. Obviously, he's a Mountain West Conference guy. Utah State. So I know the school well. I've been up there. I've actually been there many times. But you look at Jordan Love, you say, okay, he'll develop as a quarterback. Take him a couple years as a starter, right? And then he comes in, look what he does at the end of the season, and almost pulls the upset of the number 1 seed in San Francisco. Remarkable.
Yeah. I try not to be, Scott, but I will this time. I try not to be that pat myself on the shoulder guy. But I said in our last show, if there was any game the Niners were going to lose, it was going to be this one. I wasn't worried about the next one. Yeah. I was worried about this one because this Packers team is just kind of that, like, don't give an F, like, go in, and they're young and scrappy, and they're kind of it's like their culture is different. And we don't need to get in Aaron Rodgers, that's a whole other conversation, but since he left, and they've got this youth and Jordan Love, and Matt LaFleur almost feels reborn as a play caller. It's just, they've got a lot of, excitement around it. At the end of the day, San Francisco is just a much more talented team in terms of top to bottom. But I mean, this is a game I'm excited to get into because I have a lot of thoughts about this game, Scott, but it was a fun game. It was amazing. I think what Jordan Love and those Packers did, and it came down to the wire, and ultimately they probably should have won the game, if we're being honest.
Yeah. No, they should have. Absolutely. And then you look at that, though. I mean, you look at what the Packers are able to do, but then on the other side of it, you look at San Francisco, and San Francisco has the week off. They come out, they're at home, and boy, did they look rusty at the beginning, right? I mean, you look at Brock Purdy, it was like first quarter, and I'm watching social media, and I'm just seeing everybody crap on Brock Purdy. Oh, see, he was this, he was that. And then, of course, we get to the fourth quarter, Ryan, and you had brought it up, right? 0-30 going into the fourth quarter if they're behind. And of course they come out on top this time to go to 1-31, Kyle Shanahan, that is. But the 49ers, I'm concerned, as much talent as they have, hosting that Green Bay team that was hungry, that was on a streak. they just, I mean, at times they turned it on when they needed to. Obviously, at the end, it shows how good they are. But man, if they do that with Detroit, I think it might be a different story.
So I want to get your take on this, Scott.
Yeah.
I'll try to not talk too long. You know how I get long-winded sometimes on these
That's
soapbox
okay, brother.
rants.
That's okay.
But I want to hear your opinion, because I know maybe I cover the LA teams here. I live in LA. I have to deal with San Francisco fans who live in LA. So maybe I come off as a hater. I don't try to be. I think I have reason in my opinions, but I'll get your opinion after. To me, this game and the conversation was all about Purdy all through the game and all after the game. And I get it. He's the quarterback. To me, the conversation should have been about Kyle Shanahan. And the fact that not only, I mean, for whatever you want to think about Brock Purdy, he's a second-year player, regardless of when he's drafted, regardless if you think he's the franchise guy, regardless if you think he's the coming of Tom Brady. Second-year quarterback playing in his, second playoff game ever. And it's rainy. You have a defense that's playing kind of carefree in the Packers, and you have a player by the name of Christian McCaffrey, who not only is the best running back in all of football, maybe just the best overall player not named Lamar Jackson in all of football.
Right.
And going with, like, I don't know the exact timing, but basically with 7 or so minutes left in the fourth quarter, McCaffrey had 11 carries and Purdy had almost 30 pass attempts.
Yeah.
And so as a genius play caller in rainy weather, the fact that he was putting his offense and his quarterback in that situation and not utilizing his $17 million per year running back, that basically when he touches the football, good things happen. That to me should be the storyline. And if they lost this game, everyone would have blamed Purdy. Is he the answer? In reality, it was Kyle Shanahan calling, in my opinion, a very, very bad game. And if he calls a game like that again, Detroit's going to slobber knock the Niners, in my opinion. So, but before I keep going, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. I think he's completely overrated. I've thought that for a little bit. I mean, listen, I was wrong from this perspective early in the season when the editors at SportsNaut, when we all did our predictions for the year, we did our predictions for who was going to win the AFC, who was going to win the NFC, who was going to win the Super Bowl. I picked the Bengals and the Cowboys. So I was wrong in both cases. And then we picked, well, who was the most overrated team? I actually picked the 49ers. Now, I turned out to be wrong on that one because I was skeptical at that time of Purdy. Purdy convinced me as he went along. Good quarterback. I'm not saying, like you said, he's the second coming of anybody. But you're absolutely right. You're watching that game in San Francisco early on and then late on, driving rain, and he's having him throw the ball. And you're wondering, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing it? He's having to, Brock Purdy, I don't know if you saw the video, he's having to dry his hand after the snap to be able to throw the ball. But yet you're throwing the ball 30 times. So I agree with you. I don't know what the fascination with in the national media with the Shanahan family is. And no offense to you, because I know you're a Broncos guy. But Mike Shanahan, I always thought Mike Shanahan was a dirty coach. I know he coached a bunch of teams, not just Denver. But I don't know what the deal is, but they want Kyle Shanahan. I don't know if it's because he's young, good-looking dude, and they just want to make more out of him than he is. But absolutely, I thought that, and actually, I think they might have even mentioned it on the broadcast and said, this is kind of strange what they're calling here. Why we have Christian McCaffrey right there? Why aren't you using him? And yeah, I mean, I think it would have been a different game had they done that. Had they gone to Christian McCaffrey, heavy doses, especially when the weather was bad. He's going to break one, or he's going to at least chew the clock, and you're going to score, and you're not going to give Green Bay the opportunity to get out there and do what they did. And so, and you freeze out Jordan Love, meaning he's sitting on the sideline, doesn't get into a rhythm. And they did the exact opposite of that. They gave Green Bay, with all due respect to them, they gave Green Bay the opportunities. Had they done what you're talking about, they wouldn't have had those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't have, and unfortunately, Green Bay squandered some, right? They dropped 2 interceptions.
Absolutely.
They missed the field goal late, which I know Jake Moody had a blocked field goal as well. So, you can maybe put those as a wash. They were 2 for 5 in the red zone. So credit San Francisco defense, when it came push come to shove. But it's just, in my opinion, for the full 60 minutes, the Packers outplayed San Francisco. Matt LaFleur way out coached Kyle Shanahan. But credit Brock Purdy and Shanahan at the last drive when it came down to it, they put together and got it done. So I don't want to just sit here and just absolutely just be, throwing all the bad stuff on them. I just think for a coach that is continually seen as a top 5 coach in the NFL, And I get that they've been now in 3 of 4 NFC title games. I get that. I respect that. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. That's what's so hard about today, right? Like you say someone's overrated, everyone's like, you're saying they're bad. Like he is a qualified NFL coach. I'm not saying that, but to me, he is not top 5. When you look at the rosters you have, you look at the draft selections they've had, you talk about how he has full roster construction ability. There's always these excuses. Well, he hasn't had a quarterback. Well, he chose Brian Hoyer over Patrick Mahomes in the draft a few years ago.
Yeah.
He chose these different things. He chose to go and trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. He chose Brock Purdy over potentially who could have been, I'm not saying Trey Lance was the second coming, but other options. So, we'll see if it pays out. This is their year. I mean, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year and they almost lost in their first playoff game, to me, it would be the biggest catastrophe of a season for a team we've seen in a long time.
It's a good point because as I've said all year long, I think they have the most well-rounded and stocked roster in the NFL, right? But then again, Deebo Samuel hurt again, right? So you see they have some injury issues and it seems to pop up at the worst possible times. Not an excuse for them because I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of arrogance with the offensive piece of it, right? I think he's play calling, and I've seen it all year. It's not just this game. You've seen it in a couple of games where it was closer than it should have been because he gets lackadaisical. It seems to be out of sorts. Like it's out of you look at the situation and you go, why would you do that? You're supposed to be this brilliant offensive play caller. So we'll see if he can put it together in this big game, another NFC championship game for the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, and see if they can get past it. You look at that matchup now, of course, and you look at the Lions heading out there to Santa Clara to play the 49ers. And you talked about it. If we see something like we saw against Green Bay, then I think Detroit could take it to them. And I think Detroit presents a much different situation to them on offense as well, with Laporta, with the receiving core, with the running game, especially that Green Bay doesn't. I mean, Green Bay had a good running game, but nothing like Detroit. So I think the multifaceted approach of the Detroit Lions offense is going to present that San Francisco defense, as good as it is, a lot of different issues.
Yeah, well, and here's the other fact, right? Like the Niners, you look at that pass rush. I mean, Nick Bosa, they traded for Chase Young. They have Eric Armstead, 0 sacks against the Packers.
0 sacks,
and now they're going to go up against one of the second-rated offensive line in all of football with Detroit. If they're not throwing, big blitzes at Jared Goff, which they should, and which Steve Wilkes will see if he dials that up. But they have a much tougher task going against this offensive line and this offensive unit, and vice versa. You look at the Niners going against Detroit, and I feel bad. This just sounds like we're hating on the Niners, but maybe I am. I don't know. But hey, it's our show, right? It's our show.
That's right. That's right.
But you look vice versa. The Lions have a much stiffer pass rush than what the Packers had as well, and the Packers were only able to substantiate 1 sack. So I think it's a tough matchup. I think it's going to be a great game. Jared Goff coming home back to the Bay Area where he played football at Cal and where he's from. So. We'll see. And obviously if Kyle Shanahan calls, I think, a more succinct game, I still think the Niners are the favorite, which they are. I think they're +7 already. The line is, I'm sure that'll get closer as the week goes on, but starting off that it should be a hell of a game, Scott.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I think that you look at that matchup. I mean, and I think they said it on the Bills game, and maybe it was Nance or maybe it was Romo said, now you get down to these final 4 teams, and these are the teams you expected to be there, right? You had the Buccaneers, you had the Packers. Those were surprises. You, of course, had Houston, another surprise. But now you're down to the teams that you kind of pegged as somewhat favorites going in, even to the season, even though Baltimore pretty much from beginning to end was there. But you look at Kansas City and you had doubts about Kansas City. You had some doubts about Detroit for a couple weeks. San Francisco, that 3-week period, of course. And so you look at those teams and you say, yeah, those are the teams you would expect to be in the Final Four. And so I know we're going to talk about getting more into those matchups for our regularly scheduled show, which is on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And it's going to be a fun week at Sportsnaut as we get ready for those games. But yeah, you take a look at what we saw in this divisional playoff, and a couple of the takeaways I had, and Ryan, we can end with this, which is, again, goes back to having good and bordering on great, really, in most cases, quarterback play. Right. We talk about the NFL being a quarterback league, and yes, you got to play defense, and yes, you got to have a good offensive line. But you look at what these teams with the more dynamic quarterbacks, and I know we talked about Jared Goff, maybe he's not the same, but in the system he is. And so you look at what you have left between Mahomes and Jackson, and then Purdy and Goff, and you understand they win games when they have to, i.e. Purdy on the last drive for the 49ers. And that just struck me because, sometimes I get into discussions with people. Oh, well, if you could have a system quarterback and and you want to call Goff a system quarterback, I guess you could, but he's also clutch. It's a different kind of formula there too. He's also been to a Super Bowl before. So you look at all this stuff, and it's one of those situations where I think that just stuck out to me, and the importance. And if I'm a team like the Commanders, or I'm a team like the Patriots or the Raiders, or anybody like that does not have a franchise quarterback, it's a long road, man, if you don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the franchise quarterback is, if you have a great one, obviously that makes the road a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have a great one, which I think in these playoffs, and this is no disrespect to Jared Goff, to Brock Purdy, but if you don't have one, it's not making critical mistakes in critical times. And
Correct.
Neither of them did. All through these playoffs so far, Goff in 2 games. You look at, Jordan Love, as great as he's been, had the one interception that was, a little behind the guy, not even in the game interception, but during the game, little behind his tight end, tipped. It gets tipped up, interception. San Francisco goes down and scores points off that. You look at, Baker Mayfield had a critical interception, tipped again, straight up. And that was more Mike Evans' fault, probably off his hands, but it was a critical moment and resulted in points. And so when you look at these 4 quarterbacks, they haven't done that. So first, if you can, get yourself a superstar quarterback. If you can't, make sure whatever quarterback you have doesn't make critical mistakes. And then you have a much better shot to move on. Sounds simple, but
sounds simple. And there's some good ones coming out in the draft this year. And there's a couple good free agent markets. We'll talk about that in the weeks ahead, of course, as we start to look at the
Let me ask you this,
Yeah.
And I'm going to put you on the spot. This is very unfair.
Let's do it.
Very unfair, Scott. But hey, what are you at? What are you at? 2 a.m. Eastern time?
No, we're coming up on 11, and I still got we still got some sports not work to do after this, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm good.
Of course. So I love too. Every time I record with you, you're like in a different spot. There's always a different background. I try to move it around. I'm jealous of that Midwestern housing prices. You have all these rooms to go in. I have no options out here in LA. This is it. This is the one spot, and other than that, it's my kitchen.
Yeah.
But so this is unfair. So I'll try to talk a little, let you think about it. But I want to know. And we're going to get into all of it, obviously, like you mentioned, on our live show on Wednesday. But 4 key players, so 1 for each team. So when you think about these teams, the Ravens against the Chiefs, and obviously the Niners against the Lions, who are 4 players that are maybe not the quarterback. You're like, these are the key guys, and maybe I'll give mine too, that are the key to winning this game.
Well, I think I'll answer right away. So I think with the Ravens, it's going to be tight end. So Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, those guys will be big. I think they're going to have to. The Chiefs are good in the secondary. They're very good in the secondary. So I think you're going to have to attack the middle. You're going to have to take some of the outside routes and go there. Yes, Zay Flowers can impact the game, but I think really Lamar Jackson's going to have to use that. He'll have to use his legs too. I mean, and the Chiefs are not good against the run. They did pretty well tonight because the Bills abandoned it. But I think though that you have an opportunity there if you're them. The Chiefs, I would say it's going to be Pacheco again. I think they got to run the ball too against that defense. They got to soften that defense up for Mahomes to have a chance to find Travis Kelce and whatnot too. So I think it's a running game with them and being able to do that as well. On the NFC side, how can it not be Christian McCaffrey? I mean, we talked about him being underutilized against the Packers. You can't underutilize him against the Lions. You got to pound the rock with them and get them and get that physicality going. You got to be able to do that. And then I think for the Lions, it's the dual-headed running backs too. I know I'm going all running backs here, although I think Sam Laporta could be big too against that Niner defense. The Niner defense is so even though, that I think you're going to have to attack it in several ways. So it's harder, I think, for me to pick one Lions player, but I would say the running backs there. And like you said, Goff just not making mistakes.
Yeah. I think that's a good list for me. I'll go backwards to forwards, I guess. So let's start with the Niners. I'll start with Nick Bosa. You know, I mentioned the pass rush. He did have 7 pressures, but 0 sacks. So, you know, you got to get home. And that was even when the Packers lost their starting tackle, and he was going up against its backup and was still not able to truly get home. So if he's going to be considered one of the great pass rushers in our game, which he is, and rightfully so, you know, got to start getting on that sack sheet in these big moments. So for me, Nick Bosa. For the Lions, it's a cop out, but I'll go Amon-Ra St. Brown. The dude is special. He's so good.
Amazing.
USC alum. Any big moment, any big thing, and they've had some success with their other receivers too, with Jameson Williams and Josh Reynolds and the others. But Amon-Ra St. Brown to me is a top 5 receiver in this league, and when push comes to shove, he's the guy. And if he has another big game like he has had seemingly every game, they'll have a good shot. Going to the AFC. I was going to talk about the tight ends and it's amazing that Mark Andrews is back. I mean, that's a huge boost for the Ravens. I will go then how you did with every other team, but the Ravens. I'll go with the running game and talk about Gus Edwards, because if they can run against that Chiefs defense, which we saw, as you mentioned, James Cook and Buffalo able to do, and the Ravens, I think, will stick probably with it more. Yeah, they'll have some success there. And with the Chiefs, you know, we could talk about the receivers, obviously need to step up, but I'll just stick with a stalwart on defense. Ladarius Sneed, gave up his first touchdown of the entire season tonight.
That throw was
not
nuts.
Even his fault. A great comeback route and a great pass from Josh Allen. So I wouldn't blame that on him. But if he can lock down whoever he's on, whether it's Zay Flowers, they put him on a tight end, it will be tough for the Ravens passing game to get going, because he's been that good this season.
Yeah, that pass from Allen just killed me, man. It was like incredible. I mean, you talk about a perfect pass. That's the only way that's the only person who's beat Snead all year long, because it was a perfect pass. So yeah, good stuff, man. That's going to be fun to talk about as we get towards our Wednesday show. And we will dive into it there. We'll try to bring a guest on as well, talk a little bit about the game. So stay tuned for that. Do us a favor. If you haven't already subscribed to the Sports Not YouTube channel where our show appears. I know we are also on x.com as well as Facebook, but you got to check out the YouTube channel. That's where we got a lot of content every single day, new content there. So make sure you head up there, hit the subscription button, also hit the notifications bell, so you know every time we have a new video, which is often, including when we go live here on the NautZone on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We certainly appreciate that. Also, check out sportsnaut.com. We got action going all week long, getting you ready for the AFC, NFC championship game. And of course, 24/7, 365 NFL news, NBA news, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, whatever you're into, we cover it up on sportsnaut.com. Also, if you're an LA football fan, check out Ryan's Los Angeles Football Network. You can check out UCLA, USC, the Rams, the Chargers, whatever you're into, you're going to be able to find there. Lots of great shows, lots of great stuff on the website as well. So make sure you check them out as well. You can follow Ryan on x.com at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. I am I am LV Gully. I was going to say LA. I'm like, no, wait a minute. LV Gully. The show is NautZone. And of course, Sports Not on x.com too. So follow us there as well. Ryan, man, always good to chop it up with you. I will see you again on Wednesday.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure. Get some rest, and we'll see you back in a couple days.
All right, folks. For Ryan, I'm Scott Gulbransen. We will talk to you all on Wednesday. Take care, and thanks for being with us. Hope you had a great